Okay, great. Hi and welcome everybody, and thank you for our panelists for joining us today to talk about how we've incorporated AI in both our life and our research as biophysicists. I'll pause talking for a little bit and kind of pass it on to our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their research. Maybe we can start with in order how I see you. We can start with Matthias.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this invitation. Very glad to be here and talk to you. My name is Matheus Viana. I'm a director at the Allen Institute for Cell Science, director for image analysis and descriptive modeling. My background's in physics. I've been always doing image analysis and mathematical modeling applied to biological systems. It's been almost 15 years now. I've been in industry before, doing work for IBM Research back in Brazil. Then I moved to Allen 8 years ago, first as a scientist, doing a lot of traditional image analysis and getting to know more of new deep learning techniques and applying that more and more. And that's pretty much all my team does today. It's using cutting edge deep learning models to extract meaningful information from microscopy images. Yeah.
Great. Next up, Ilya.
Yes, I'm Ilya. Well, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for having me here. And yes, I'm a theoretical biophysicist. I'm still in the physics department, also in the biology department at Emory University. And I run a very diverse group in terms of the kind of things that we do. We study learning in animals. We study human physiology, progression of diseases like diabetes. I'm very interested, have always been for 20 some years in understanding machine learning, what used to be called machine learning now is called AI, from the perspective of information theory. And this is what we still publish. And for about the last maybe 7-8 years, we've been using various custom designed neural networks to infer what we call new physics from experimental data, sort of trying to understand what are the interactions in particular systems that we analyze. And this could be things like a simple C. elegans worm, or it could be a bunch of interacting agents, what are the laws of interactions between them, things like that.
Great. And finally, Serena.
All right. Thank you so much for your invitation. It's really great to talk to you and with you. So I studied physics, the others, and then I became more and more interested in understanding how bacteria behave, especially in response to perturbation. And so these are out of equilibrium systems. So imagine like all the full statistical machinery doesn't work. Statistical physics machinery doesn't work, but we can actually try to use this framework to understand something about them. And this was basically what interested me during my research. But then I joined a journal, and now I don't work there anymore, but I was like an editor for quite some time, and there I witnessed a little bit the changes that will happen and is happening thanks to AI, or due to AI LLMs, especially for text editing in particular. And yeah, I think that's
Thank
all.
you. Yes.
Yeah.
It's. Oh, sorry. No, please.
No, I said that's all. Yeah.
Sorry. It cut out a little bit in the middle.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No, it's fantastic to hear just even in those introductions about how much you've used AI or machine learning in your research, even kind of before this it was popularized in the kind of common lexicon of the populace. My lab studies how organisms, including bacteria, move through complex environments and how they process mechanical cues from their environments, and how those cues, even when those cues are dynamic and changing, how they integrate those into motility strategies and adaptive motility. And largely we didn't use that much machine learning and AI in our research as tools until very recently, where we've kind of started to see more and more tools being developed for tracking, for pose estimation, and for kind of gait characterizations, and we've kind of now started integrating them. So it's really very kind of interesting to hear uh, about your research and how you've kind of been using it for so long. Has there been a transition with how you've seen the kind of increase in tools being used, and has that affected your particular research goals, the way that you approach the problems you're asking? And anybody can start, but we can kind of go in the same order if we need to.
Yeah, I'm really excited about, in particular, because I work with microscopy images, the capability of new generative models as like biological simulators that we can do in a computer. Especially, we've been working a lot with diffusion models, and it's really remarkable what these models can do, right? It also requires a lot of fine-tuning, validation, making sure that everything it's working in place. But one of the things we've been exploring quite a lot is if you have two populations of cells, for example, and you can represent the cells using some of these models, and then you embed these populations in a latent space, and now you can interpolate between condition A, that can be a control, versus population B, that can be a drug-treated cells or some disease cells, and you can generate samples along the way as you walk from A to B and visualize what is happening to the cells, right? This is also aligned with the interpretability of what these models are learning about the cells. I think this is a great venue that my team is pursuing right now.
Great.
I guess it's my turn, right?
Yes.
So look, I think it's a softball in some sense. It's like it's a very soft question, in that it's clearly easy. Things have changed, right? Things have really changed. Right? From what we do, we use over the counter, basically standard AI, ChatGPT, Claude, all the time, right? You go into a new field, and you're just, before going there, go and ask what's known about the following question. Are there papers related to this? Or, I heard at some seminar that, there was a paper about this and that. Could you find me that paper? Right? Works amazingly well, right? When I talk with students nowadays, when I give them projects to work on, I don't just give them a project, I give them a transcript of my interaction with LLM on a certain topic, right? Like we're trying to design a particular set of question. I want to understand questions along these lines. What is known? How would you formulate a question? Why is this a good question? And then this whole transcript of a couple of hours of interactions goes to a student, and that's kind of a starting point for a student to work with, right? As of maybe about a year ago, LLMs are pretty good at doing math, and you still have to check what they do, which, by the way, I often just, the output from Claude I give to ChatGPT to check, and the other way around. And then, of course, you have to check it yourself. But nonetheless, but the point is that, I don't know all of math. I know a very tiny sliver of both math and physics, and LLMs, maybe they're not as good as an expert in any particular field, at least not yet, but they know all of it, right? And so when I need to solve a problem, somewhere, in the depths there, some attention layer gets activated, and it picks out a paper, which is, I would never have guessed that this is paper on the same subject, right? And it is. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it creates a paper, it doesn't exist on it, and you have to tell it that it created garbage, but sometimes it finds a paper which solves your problem, right? And that's also sort of a useful thing. Writing papers, from small editorial help to just even things like, this is an outline of a paper I want to write. Do you think that this outline makes sense? Is there a flow, logical flow? Is there a coherent story? What is a gap in the story, right? So this is a kind of thing that I ask before I start writing, and that's what I actually ask my students to do before they produce a draft, right? Like, don't waste somebody else's time. Just work with this free agent, and out something that works reasonably well, right? I keep telling both students, graduate students, undergraduates, is that LLM is probably not going to steal your job, but the person who knows how to use it might, right? So you might as well just embrace it and figure out how to work with the systems, right? It's just, for me, everything has changed. My entire pipeline of doing research has changed over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, if I can follow up, this is really perfect, Ilya. Thank you for landing this in this part, because it's clear that, like, from the published point of view, this is gonna affect a lot. So from really something very, very minor, like if you Google now a manuscript, if you even know the title of the manuscript, the first thing that comes to you is a blurb of the manuscript itself, right? So now Google itself gives you a blurb. So that means that, like, there is no point of summarizing, writing pieces, short pieces, because the LLMs are doing instantaneously for this specific manuscript. So there is probably like more need to do different services, right? To integrate LLMs in the system and provide different services than just a summary of the results. And of course, it's not perfect, but it's a very good approximation, sometimes even better, like what humans can write. So, and it's instantaneous, right? So, and then potential, I mean, in terms of writing, I think this is the democratization of science, because finally people with like an advantage, language advantage, won't have this advantage anymore. And so everybody can write almost professionally or like at the same level of native speaker. So this is going to be also, but it's going to be problematic to understand the quality of manuscript just based on proxy on text, right? So right now, we probably, like, publisher need to screen potential manuscript for other criteria, not just the quality of the text, or like or other or what before was supposed to be a parameter that flag possible fraudulent manuscript, for example. So to me, AI changed completely the way I operate. So I interact with AI constantly. I write, I edit my text. I even ask, do you think that this is going to be upsetting the author if I write something like that? So, and I mean, and so it's not always correct, as Ilya was saying. So you really need to correct for it, especially because it always trying to please you. So this kind of question is like, oh no, it's not going to upset anybody. What do you mean? Are you? Is it true? Or like, would someone with this problem will be responding? So you need to kind of interact with it, but the most important thing is that if they don't understand it, probably because I didn't explain it correctly, right? So that's first check. And as Ilya was saying, like, the best thing you can do is to try to interact with LLMs as much as possible before you go to a person and then use their time. So it's really, for me, it's really something, I mean, that is going to change the publishing industry, and we're going to see it probably in the next few years. A lot of publishers will adopt more AIs or LLMs for screening paper, for assessing potential problems and stuff like that. So I'm seeing like a kind of a revolution from the publishing perspective, in my experience, my personal experience.
Yeah. No, I mean that's really fascinating. And kind of both Ilya and Serena brought up this idea now that kind of it changes the way that we approach questions, the way that we kind of structure how we pose questions, how we kind of formulate problems, and how we find papers, how we not just the tools that we're using to analyze our research, but how we approach research as a kind of philosophical entity. how does that then change the way that we mentor students, in particular students who, you know, grew up essentially knowing AI, right? So I have a small daughter. She will never live her life without
without
AI, and that's to me a kind of mind-blowing thing. But how do you mentor students to be kind of wary and careful about this entity that they just accept as 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 all kind of all encompassing?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I don't have much experience tutoring with students, but maybe I can talk a little bit about something related, which is the way people in my team implement code today versus 5 years ago, right? Which is pretty much everyone here have access to GitHub Copilot, right? So they have this agent that sits on the side of the screen, and as you write your code, you can all the time like go to the agent and say, oh, I want to write this function that does that. And it basically does that and a lot more for you, right? And constantly I go back to them and I try to ask, like, do you understand what this function that was written to you is actually doing, right? It's very easy for anyone today to implement a very fancy network that was published like 1 week ago. You can just go to Gemini and ask, it's going to implement for you. And what I ask my people to do is slow down a little bit. You don't need to implement this very fancy model first, right? Try to find what is the foundation of this new model. Try to find the first reference that use this model. Implement a small version. You can use Gemini to do that, but try to understand what is happening, right? Apply to a small data set that's of your interest. For us, it's like cells, but really do a deep dive and understand, like build intuition before just go blindly and use this Copilot to implement the latest fancy version of any model. And that has been working pretty well for us.
I guess I'm here of the three panelists, the only one who teaches undergraduate classes. So it's right now, actually, for example, I'm teaching a human physiology, human diseases class, right? Modeling diseases, and through the college, through Emory College, we have this constant discussions. How do we implement? How do we use AI? In some people don't allow AI at all. How do you do the tests, exams? That's a question, right? Homework. Maybe you move to in-class exams where somebody's sitting in front of the student and just do an oral exam like we used to when I was a kid back in the former Soviet Union and things like that. So that's aside. I don't have answers, right? But in my class, so for example, we were discussing GLP-1s, GLP-1 agonists, and I mentioned to students in class that, GLP-1 acts as a predictive signal of glucose coming in a few minutes. And so maybe we should think about it in terms of predictive coding. And then the students are supposed to open their ChatGPT or Claude or whichever one that they're using with and immediately start asking, does this idea make sense? Has somebody done this similar analysis? Are there models? Are there papers that are referred to this? They get a few minutes and then we discuss what it is that they found. Does it make sense what they found, right? That does this idea make sense? And sometimes once in a while, I deliberately give them ideas that I know don't make sense, right? Or that they will find once they start doing this ChatGPT stuff, they will figure out that this could have been a solution or could have been a good idea, but in fact, it's, in a different alternative universe, it was probably, but in the one that we live in, it's just the wrong idea, right? And so the whole point of this teaching is to integrate this essentially infinite pool of data that exists at your fingertips and then figure out train them just like with anything else, right? You need to train your ability to do math. You need to train your ability to do the writing. And maybe if you do too many shortcuts, you never develop that ability. Maybe it's a great thing. Maybe it's not. Like maybe we don't need that ability. Maybe it can be replaced. Like arithmetic is now replaced with calculators, and it's okay. We survive. It's not a big deal, right? And so maybe not everything that we used to do will survive, and some of it will get replaced. But even learning how to work with the modern AI tools during one's education, that's still an educational experience, right?
Yeah.
And I think that none of us has a solution because these tools are very new. We're all trying. But I make it a point that in every class we are doing something with LLMs, right? That's
it's a really kind of interesting and refreshing viewpoint, Ilya, because what I've kind of seen as a like a kind of perspective on AI in undergraduate teaching is kind of two. It's a bimodal response, right? One is the way that you've done it, which is to kind of integrate it within teaching and saying that, well, you know, these students are going to be in this era where they're using AI, and AI is going to become increasingly present in their lives, and so they should learn how to use it and they should understand it. And kind of another perspective is that the use of AI somehow might, or the uninhibited use of AI might inhibit kind of mechanistic thinking and deep thinking about the problems at hand. And so the kind of reactionary thing then is to just ban AI and to do, you know, in-class exams, oral exams, things like this, which kind of make sure that the students do not use AI and instead use their brains. And in some sense, we need to find a kind of a new balance in this way with undergraduate teaching in particular, because AI is just so increasingly a presence in their life. Sorry, Serena, please.
Yeah. So I will switch towards like teaching how to write a perfect manuscript, for example, right? That was like the thing that I was doing as editor. So I still think that it's a valuable tool to actually discuss in person without the use of AI how to write a manuscript, because then you can evaluate how, like, the things that LLMs spit back at you, right? So not everything that they write makes sense. Not everything that they write is, so they're very verbose, and like at the moment, it's not that if you ask AI to write an article, it's gonna be the perfect article that you can publish in Pathfactor Journal. So I still see that there is some value to learning how to convey a message in the best way possible, or like what kind of references or citations need to be added, what the criteria to write basically a manuscript. So I think this is something that is probably understudied and underexplained for grad and undergrad. So I think I never was taught how to write a manuscript, but probably this is something that might eventually, when LLMs will become very, very good at that, might eventually be not a problem anymore. But I still see some value, like in teaching people like the reasoning of writing a manuscript and what's behind it, and what are the reason. I mean, what are the clues that you need to add, basically.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Story, right? The story, yeah, that you want to write. So it really depends if you write a good story, or if you ask AI right now to write one.
Yeah, I think kind of just stemming off of that, and then just a very kind of complementary question is how do we ensure that happens? How do we kind of ensure that AI tools complement rather than kind of replace these innate tools, this kind of intuition of both kind of the physics of systems, so like when you're posing questions, and then when you're kind of writing them up as a story. In both of these kind of aspects of research, how can we make sure that AI tools don't kind of replace this intrinsic intuition when we teach and when we mentor and when we kind of do our own work?
I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of getting lazy and just accepting everything that the LLM gives to you. I think conversations like this, it's always good to remind ourselves like these things are not perfect, right? And as mentors, or it's our job, part of our job also to tell the students or trainees or employees, in my case, that they do need to understand the basics of what's being done. If it's code or text, they need to be accountable for what's in there, right? I don't know if I have a better answer to this question.
Yeah, I think none of us has an answer
No.
everything.
This provides-
But I think that it's again it's not the first time this happens, right? At some point there was a transition from writing to typing, and I'm sure there were a bunch of people at the time who were saying that this is extremely valuable skill, the calligraphy, and you know, how can you live without that? And we survived, right? And there was calculators, and we also survived. And of course, there is a difference between calligraphy and the ability to critically think. And so we need to develop kind of tools and thinking about how do I train a student to find what's a correct way of expressing the ideas, what are the correct ways of writing an article. And again, I would actually, and not just I would, we do use LLMs in this type of things where somebody provides a first draft of an abstract and we drop it into chat and ask it in you know, do not try to be very polite and just point out what the problems are, right? Do not tell us that it's already a good abstract and you just need to improve a few things. No, just tell us what's wrong, right? And I think that we learn very well from examples. And so just the ability to use the systems as examples of both good and bad with correct annotation is extremely useful. So it might actually improve our ability. My student doesn't have to come and work with me sentence by sentence for me pointing out, you know, why this sentence is not in the right place, why this sentence is bad, right? They could do this with this additional agent that doesn't have a limitation that they have to do a million other things at the same time, right? So it might actually improve things, right? I don't know. It's just keeping in mind the goal that and trying different things and figuring out what works. And, you know, some students will unfortunately not learn, and some will learn and actually become even better than they would have been otherwise, right? It's just, that's what it is, right?
Yeah, I think Kayla is right. I think the ultimate quality of the product that is delivered is probably going to be the selecting, because I mean, LLMs by themselves are not great. So you really need to direct them. The logical, I mean, there's still like logical flows. So it's just a tool that you can use to improve here and there, and like, for example, do some deep search, but it's not that it's going to solve the full problem. And even like Mateus was mentioning, like the coding, but like I use it for Excel, they come back with a lot of issues. So you always need to go back and forth until you find the last bit that works. So it's not really like you ask a thing and then you spit out the answer that is perfect. In which case we won't be able to differentiate between good and bad, right? But in more realistic scenario, we will have a tool that people need to use, and some people will use it correctly and some other won't. And so eventually the people that understand the things will probably succeed anyway, right? So that's to me is like it's really important for them to actually become independent researcher, right? So if they don't use this tool, but also if they don't think independently in a balanced way, they're probably not going to be able to become influential researcher. That's what I'm thinking. So I think I'm very positive. I think it's going to be naturally setting up to a new set of expectations, but we'll see what these expectations are.
Do you think so? Kind of these these ideas that you've put forward about, how you've implemented teaching AI in a responsible way to your students, to your mentees, to your teams. These are kind of very individual efforts that you all are doing because you're thinking very conscientiously about AI. As a kind of institution of research, do you think there's something that should be done from a kind of top-down way to ensure that this is the way that, or there is a way that we approach AI in the next generation? Or do you think it's just these kind of like individual efforts that will hopefully then create, as Serena suggests, like a group of the students and mentees who use AI in the right way that kind of rise to the top naturally? Is that a process that you think we can trust?
Jasmine, I think my connection cut for a little bit. I think I missed the
Oh.
main part of your question.
Oh yeah, I guess kind of in a very short way is do we trust that if individual people like you all are teaching responsible use of AI to the students, that's enough to ensure that the next generation of researchers will use AI responsibly? Or should there be some top-down structural efforts at the university level, at the academy level, at the journal level to ensure that this is enforced in some way?
Again, that's a very hard question to answer. I do believe that there must be some regulations, some top-down regulations. Otherwise, it's just like no one's land, right? Specifically about journals, I think there must be some regulations in terms of authorship. Like the moment the LLMs start writing 50% of the text, like, does it even make sense to consider one of these large models to be a co-author in a paper? I don't think that must be the case, but conversations like this have to happen. And if the efforts we are putting in place are enough or not to guarantee that they're going to succeed and use these models for driving science forward, I think it's too early to tell. I think we are all trying to do the best we can with the research we have, the little bit of experience we have, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, there are simple answers and there are more complicated ones. Like, for example, Emory, we are a very large hospital, right? And smaller university and with a big hospital attached to it. And a lot of what we do is regulated by HIPAA on the hospital size, and then we kind of, as a university, have to go along with the hospital-based regulations. And so doctors already use LLMs for summarizing their notes. So they transcribe their notes, which are required to be into the patient files by LLMs. Data analysis in public health schools, in medical schools, is often done with LLMs as well, and this data needs to be HIPAA compliant. And so the universities like mine, for example, they decided that we all have a specific LLM, or actually a specific set of different LLMs, like Microsoft Copilot is one of those that are HIPAA compliant, and everybody gets access to it, right? So they just want to avoid having issues where accidentally some of the data leaks out that shouldn't, because everybody is going their own way and it's a Wild West, right? And so this kind of things definitely need to happen, and they are happening, right? Right now in my own college and the arts and sciences at Emory, we have a top-down driven sort of decanal level initiative to figure out what we're going to do with AI for teaching, right? And it's great that I do it one way and somebody else does it another way. And, I'm sure that we all can learn from each other. And at some point, just like there are standard books that we all go through for intro physics classes, I'm sure there's going to be new books or new tools, or this could be, Google Colab notebooks together with the textbook that will incorporate some of these things into the teaching process, right? It's going to take a few years, right? it's important, I think, that also that regulations and these top-down initiatives don't start producing regulations too early. I think, right? At this point, we need to, from my perspective at least, gather data, try to figure out what works and what doesn't, and understand that as a process, while we are in this Wild West setting, some students will get a better side of the deal than the others, just because you got a more prepared faculty member teaching, or better environment or whatever it is. But I think that if we just try to introduce rules and regulations right now, we are going to pattern them based on our own training and upbringing, which was before AI became useful, and therefore is probably going to be in the way of AI becoming useful rather than helping, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think the regulations should be there. As Mateus was saying, like journals should be coming up with a set of rules, all right? Not rules, but guidelines, the guidelines. Of course, I mean, you cannot have AI as a coder because these people need to sign up, right? They need to be accountable for what they wrote. So LLMs are not accountable for it. So they cannot be authorship, but they should be acknowledged. At least people can acknowledge that they use it for text editing. Although I don't think text editing is a major challenge, because text editing is not really. The problem is data manipulation, data images. So if the image is produced with AI, then that's a little bit different, especially plots or stuff that is scientifically relevant. It's very difficult to find the source and the provenance of the data of the image that these LLMs generate. So I think that's probably still seen as skeptical by journal publisher. I don't know, for example, if you want to just do a cartoon, it's probably going to be less impactful. But if you want to propose a plot and AI is generating that plot, well, I'll be a little bit more cautious about that. So definitely journals are facing a big challenge screening all these LLMs written paper, because the production will increase for sure, not only by legitimate authors, but also by paper mills and people that use this technique to actually, submit how do you say, papers that are not correct, right? So like misconduct, right? So to understand misconduct behavior. So I think this posing a big threat for journals, because if they start publishing a lot of this content, the journal reputation might not survive. So for sure, from the journal perspective, from the publishing perspective, this is like a major shift. That's why I'm saying like you'll see probably a change in the next few years. But at the moment, I have to say that I'm not particularly worried about the text editing, while I'm more worried about data image manipulation and the fact that it's going to be a surge in manuscript production. So we had to be screening way more manuscript than before, and much faster. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges that journals are facing right now and in the future.
It brings up a really, really interesting point in this idea of kind of this ethical concern of AI generated data and plots. So kind of a broader, a specific question off of that is, how do you think this will change our perspective as a kind of scientific community on reproducibility and the importance of negative results? Because at the way that the publishing often works is negative results are not really worth publishing. Reproducibility is, I think we all in this group acknowledge how important reproducible research is, but in kind of the, for promotion, for tenure, these kind of things are not often considered. Do you think the use of AI in publishing will change our perspective on that? And then kind of a broader question is, how does it change our perspective on kind of ethical concerns in research? And this can relate also, to Ilya's point on HIPAA and the access of AI to private and sensitive data. It's kind of broader senses of ethical concerns leading to AI and how that might change
Yeah,
the infrastructure of how we do research. Sorry.
I think it could go both ways, in a sense that it's definitely a tool that makes the writing process fast, right? So I want to believe that most of the researchers are serious researchers that want to do real science, and that helps a lot, right? Especially for non-native speakers, like as Irina was saying, like it's very easy for us to write good quality text, right? So that can increase the amount of papers that are produced, but good quality papers. The downside is that it actually increased the amount of papers that are produced that are like black box. So you have something there, you don't quite know why you get that result, it's not clear, but you get that 5% accuracy that is better than the previous method, right? There's a lot of what is called amplification of bias too. Basically garbage in, garbage out, right? So you have this model that is trained on a particular, like imagine RNA-seq. You have model trained on RNA-seq of European population, and then you generalize that to the rest of the world, and you publish that result. And then someone else tries to reproduce that, and it's going to see that it's not quite that accurate, right? Because the model is so biased. So again, I think we are in the early stages to see how this is going to pan out. I'm positive about it, but also cautious.
Yeah. I mean, I think going back to that Rumsfeld's quote about the known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns, right? And that the things about ethical considerations in terms of HIPAA compliance, FERPA compliance for us who are educators, right? You shouldn't be putting somebody's transcripts or grades into an open ChatGPT thing, because that's definitely a FERPA violation. So those things are known knowns, right? Then there are some of the more complicated stuff that, how do you check that the data is really true, that this plot is not created. We kind of trust each other in some sense, right? This whole system is based on trust. You're a reviewer, you're going to verify my plot, but if I say that this is a result of my simulation, in principle, you can check it. In practice, you won't. So trust is important, and it's very easy now to violate this, right? That's it's a known unknown, and maybe those ones you can actually solve even with the help of AI. You could ask to reproduce a plot. You can ask to, following, which I do a few times, right? Reading some papers, if I don't understand something, I ask AI to code this, like just not even code, but ask ChatGPT, reproduce this plot from this simulation, show me a simulation in a different window, and sometimes it can, sometimes it can't, right? So those things we can kind of figure out. What I'm more afraid about is the unknown unknowns, which are going to come, and they're going to hit, and they're going to hit bad, but it's also not the reason to not try, right? We kind of have to get there.
Do you think, just as a kind of a poke on that, on this idea of the unknown unknowns, you talked in kind of our previous discussion about different revolutions that happened, right? So calculators, all of these changes that came in and revolutionized how we did science. Do you think a difference with AI is that there are more unknown unknowns than in these kind of previous revolutions? Or is there no difference? Is it just kind of another one of these cycles?
I mean, I don't know, right? So one of our senior colleagues in the department, Feridun family, right? He was one of the first generation in the 70s, 80s of computational physicists. And he keeps on telling me stories about how publishing papers at the time on simulating snowflakes. This was one of his most famous papers, right? People didn't view it as science because, you know, you cannot solve it on a piece of paper and it's not an experiment. What is that, right? And now it's accepted that this is an equal part of science. And I think that what people were arguing at the time, I wasn't there, I don't know, but I think that they probably were arguing very different questions without realizing that at a certain point in time, we will really be doing, let's say, molecular dynamics simulations of millions of atoms, trying to figure out how ribosome faults, right? And we will be able to do this as the unknowns, right? That, like, I don't think that anybody believed that in the 70s that we are, maybe some real visionaries could, I don't know, but most of the people were arguing about, are we going to numerically solve an ODE, right? But not this massive discoveries that were made, right? I think that unknowns show up everywhere, and how big they are. This revolution feels bigger, but maybe because it's the only one that we live through. Previous ones we didn't live through. Maybe they felt equally big.
Well, I mean, I don't have too much to add to this point. Like they were saying, like there are so many things that we cannot predict. But I mean, to me, I mean, apart from the standard ethical concern, I think there are people that we make mistakes. I mean, you can make mistakes. You can use it in the wrong way and without realizing. And there are people that will use it to break or to get some advantage. So I think we need to distinguish two cases, right? So if it's just a mistake, perhaps these ethical considerations, are less important. If we see that someone is exploiting the system to their advantage, and then there is a leverage there, then I agree with you. We need to address that and make sure that everybody has a fair opportunity, and not that like someone can take advantage of it. But in terms of like ethical concern, I'm more like I think that like at least in physics, people really produce their own figures, at least. I mean, the people that I've met, the people that I talked to, even if, so the paper is done by the figures and then the text follow later, right? So you start with like understanding which figure you want to put in the paper, and I think that's probably like what I value as the important part of a manuscript. So if that part is ethically produced, the text probably is less of a problem, in my opinion, even if it's manipulated. So ethical concern is really about like data manipulation or data fabrication or stuff like that you don't know how these things are produced, and then you use them anyway, right? So, and if you do it like recurrently, eventually you're gonna get caught, because I think it's something that statistically will come up. So it's better to be careful, because when you lose the trust, then it's a problem, right? If people think that you are exploiting the system, that's not gonna look good on you. So it's up to their benefit not to overuse it, I think, of each researcher. So that's why I think there is this world in which everything is gonna be the best it could be, like a little bit like Voltaire.
Yeah. Worth mentioning that journals are actively working towards cutting this misconductions more and more often, right?
Exactly.
And there's
using
a lot
AI tools.
Yeah,
Using
there's a lot
AI
of
tools, by the way.
research developing AI tools to cut fraud, and
Yes. So there is like a lot of new startup companies that do check on references, for example. So I don't know if you know a lot of them, but there are like more and more startups working exactly to do forensic analysis and like digit analysis of the last digit to see if the data were fabricated or modified. So it's a new job. I think it's a new opportunity for many people to investigate.
There's
so
a
I
lot
see
of
this
conversations around a way of watermarking images that are generated by AI models. So you can always check if it's AI generated. Of course, you can also manipulate that, but it's one extra level, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. So, but yeah, I think it's interesting, even like finding a way to identify those issues. But I mean, the single mistake, I wouldn't be too much worried about it. You know, like single time stuff.
As we're kind of coming up to the end of the hour, I'll shift towards a kind of a more a positive question. So rather than thinking about kind of just the concerns that AI poses, what might be the biggest opportunities that AI poses for discovery, and particularly in biological physics? And kind of my thought on it is, as I think Ilya mentioned at the start, this idea that while we might be experts in one particular type of physics, one particular type of math, one particular type of biology, AI knows maybe not as much as the experts in that field, but knows a little bit of everything. And to that end, how do you see kind of interdisciplinarity in our field changing, or kind of any other opportunities in the next, let's say 5 to 10 years?
yeah, I think I'm gonna talk about something concrete that we've been exploring here at the Allen Institute, which is this idea of self-driving lab, right? Yeah, so the idea is that with these models, the current state of the art, you can integrate imaging, analysis, pipetting, like web bench work with robots and all of that. And you could have like an AI model that designs an experiment, run the experiment, take images, analyze everything on the fly, and steer the experiment as it goes, right? Imagine you're doing some cell differentiation, trying a new protocol, and the cells are not differentiating the way you want. You can on the fly change the protocol and try something else, right? And these things basically run 24/7, right? You have to be able to inspect results here and there, but I think this is something that we're going to see more and more in the upcoming maybe 5 to 10 years range. And it's a perfect example of interaction between different fields, because it uses like computer science, imaging, photonics, image analysis, math, and yeah.
So, I mean, what was that quote? That predicting is hard, especially about the future, right? That's it. I think it applies here as well. And I 5 years in the future, we probably can predict 20 years into the future, whatever we're going to say is going to be totally off, right? The usual thing.
Yeah.
I think that where, at least in my research, I see sort of AI becoming really useful is the following. As a theorist, we're all trained on kind of Landau school, in the sense that here is a system, it has certain symmetry, it has certain locality properties. If you're going to try to write a model, it better satisfy those, right? And there's not that many models that do, and there's just a few left, and then you can check which one agrees with experiment, and the one that does is the right one, right? That's the standard protocol, right? And you start dealing with real large-scale models of, let's say, brain, and there is no locality anymore, because you can throw an axon from one side of the brain to another side of the brain. Temporal locality is not there as well, because there is memory, there is internal states, and so at that point, how do you even characterize the appropriate theories, right? By which, how do you catalog them? How do you try them all? There are just way too many. How do you detect patterns? It's easier to detect something that you are looking for, right? Rather than just something out of the blue. And when we are looking for a certain symmetry, something, then we know how to look for it. But we as humans, I mean, I've seen enough from this various data sets. We later turns out that there is a model there is some interesting patterns there, but we're not trained to detect them. They're not part of our standard theoretical toolbox, right? And I think that this is where AI would be kind of useful in my own field, is the detection of patterns that I can later try to figure out what they mean, and also a very quick check of whether certain theories actually describe this data. I don't have to do it on a paper and pencil one at a time. We can do it on a big computer for many of them, right? And yeah, I mean, there are some papers from us, from others, for where people are doing this type of things, but I think we're just starting. It's just very few baby steps.
Irina, before you go, I have a comment and maybe a question for Ilya. So this week I was reading one of the blog posts by Terence Tao, the famous mathematician. He's a partnership with Google DeepMind, and they have this new AI model that can now understands math so well that can now prove theories, theorems, and find new ways of proving theorems. And I guess my question is, do you see an opportunity to do that in physics?
I do, except that I think it will be slightly different, right? Because physics data is kind of noisy and we don't know which assumptions to make. So in math, you start with a bunch of axioms and you go from there, right? You know what you're trying
It's clean.
to do, right? And so here, what I always tell my students is that you don't want to solve the first problem you formulated. You need to formulate a problem that approximates the reality where the approximation is easy enough to solve, right? And I think that we haven't yet figured out how to do. But look, this is also a computer. It's not an artificial intelligence, but maybe not even that intelligent.
Natural intelligence.
The natural computer, right? So there is no reason why a computer cannot be trained to try reasonable assumptions, try reasonable, simple models and see what works, right? The question is, do we get there in 5 years or do we get there in 20 years? I don't know, right? I really don't know, right? But we'll get there, right? It's just, there is no reason not to.
Thank you.
I could skip. It's fine if we are running out of time. Jasmine,
No,
you tell me.
we can close
Okay,
up.
okay. Yeah, I don't have.
We'd love to hear. No, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Well, I don't have too much to add. Actually, I was curious to know from Matteo if those LLMs help you really. I mean, is it really feasible? Or like, can you actually run what are the things that these LLMs give back to you? It's like something realistic, something that makes sense, even if it's outside of your field. I mean, how can you trust those? And it's more of a question than like an additional thing.
Yeah, in our case, we are basically using the AI as an agent to look at the images that are acquired, do some analysis, and steer the microscope.
All right, so but
that
they
is
don't set up
feasible.
experiments.
Exactly.
It's not that they start the experiment from scratch.
Yeah, the next step is to integrate the LLM that reads the protocols and suggests what would be the next one.
Okay.
Right?
Okay,
That's something we're working towards.
Yeah, I would be curious to know if that works actually, because that's probably
we
where
are too.
where you start like seeing the limits of these LLMs right now, right? So because logically, I mean, they're kind of flawed still. I mean, I don't know about the math one, but yeah, I mean, that's it.
Yeah. Okay, great. So as we're kind of coming up to the end of this, I just want to give everybody a chance for any final thoughts or any, in particular, advice to young researchers who might watch this and want to know how can they kind of engage with LLMs in the most meaningful way, and how they can kind of learn physics in this new landscape that we find ourselves in the kind of most efficient and useful way.
Yeah.
Any last tidbits?
I can speak a little bit, but not specifically about the LLMs, but more from the point of view of coding. And my advice would be ignore the pressure of knowing everything, because there is no way to keep up with the pace things are going, right? and instead try to identify 2 core papers that are related to the research you're doing, implement small versions of that, really try to understand deep. That the intuition you build by getting your hands dirty, it's much better than reading 50 abstracts. That is my one advice.
And I don't know. I think that we are maybe not the best people in giving advice in this context, because again, at least I was trained without, when LLMs didn't exist. So what do I know, right? I think that just viewing AI systems that exist now as yet another agent that you either can cooperate with or can compete with, or both, or right, that's maybe a correct or a possible correct approach. In which case, look, you want to get a job at a good place, you have to be better than your competitor, and there has to be something that you are better in than LLMs are. So there has to be a field where you know more than ChatGPT, at some corner of the world, and at the same time, it's an incredible multiplier of what you can do. And so use it as a multiplier. So you collaborate with it, and yet you out-competed on some directions that is crucial, right? How to do this, I don't know. It's an interesting world.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can say like try to learn something out of it, right? Like instead of like you need to extract something from these LLMs, not the vice versa. So they're learning from us. Every time you ask something, they're learning more and more. But like you should like just use it, not be used, right? So that's probably what I recommend.
It's a very nice kind of phrasing, right? Use it or be used, not be used. All right, great. I think that's a very nice place to pause this conversation. I think it's an ongoing conversation that we all as biophysical researchers and mentors and trainers of the next generation of scientists should be kind of constantly having. But thank you for the three of you for joining and discussing.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much.